Chapter 13. Répondez, s'il vous plaît. 1. As I pulled into our driveway after coming home from work, I took in the beauty of the postcard scene. Christmas was just a week away. The trees were all green and donned twinkling lights. The windows, roofline, and front door were also lit. Nora had put up a wreath in the center of each window. I believed there wasn't a better place in all the earth than to be in this home, on this barrier island. "I'm home," I yelled as I kicked off my shoes at the door. No one answered. Again, "Hello, Finnegan Barrett here, winner of Husband of the Year Award and Dad of the Century Award." No one again. "Is any—" "Hey, Dad." Cassidy zipped past me, focused on her purpose, aware of me, giddy. "Daddy," she called for my attention. "Do you think this will look good here?" She stretched, reaching, simulating where the tree ornament might go. Overpriced Christmas garland graced the mantel of our fireplace. Nat King Cole was caroling us in our living room, a cradle in Bethlehem. Nora was on the phone in the kitchen. As usual, she was multitasking. Something smelled good. Stew? And Cassidy, as she was every year since she could help decorate our home, was dramatically and overly concerned about where the next bulb or reindeer or snowflake should go. "Looks great," I said, as I shimmied off my jacket to drape it over the back of the chair. Nora swooped it up just as I let it go. With her head cocked to the side and holding the phone against her shoulder, she took my coat, mouthing the words, "Not here." She kissed me. "I don't know, are you sure?" Cassidy said with a puzzled tone. "Cassidy," I snapped with a small but quickly developed irritation in my voice. "It's fine, I promise." "I was just asking, you don't have to be so touchy." She stood there with her chosen decoration in hand, resting an index finger on her chin, studying the tree with intense contemplation. She refused to place an ornament until she was sure of its resting place. Careful consideration is something she got from one of her grandmothers. I'm sure of that. I stared at her with admiration. It was quite something that she wanted to take this task for the third year in a row, this being the first year that we let her decorate the entire thing, start to finish. I also, a slight bit concerned, wondering how a 6-year-old could be so uptight about decorating a tree. "I'm sorry," I said as I kissed the top of her head. This was a familiar phrase coming from me. I had discovered in my self-evaluation that I was always asking myself, why can't I just be more patient with this sweet little girl? Cassidy hummed the ambient music under her breath. She'd resolved to be happy. "Daddy, can you put this up there?" "Here?" I said, with the intention to get it right and get to the kitchen to inspect from where that delicious smell came. "No, there," she pointed. "Here?" "No, left." "Here?" "Down." "Here?" It dawned on me as I turned to see her face. A grin from ear to ear. She was playing, a trait she got from Nora. At that moment I was amused and happy to be exactly where I was, in the midst of her light-hearted play. I placed the glittery Santa, with his mittened hand waving at me, upon his fake pine tree home for the next 12 to 20 days. I stood there, hands on hips, proud of my accomplishment, the achievement of fastening St. Nick into the perfect location. But just as quickly as I was toasting myself, I found myself questioning if it was in the right spot. My eyebrows pressed together, and I pursed my lips. "Daddy." She was looking through the box for the next ornament. "Can we go to Grandma's and Grandpa's soon? It doesn't have to be for Christmas, but soon?" My thought was, why must you do this to me? My words were, I think we could do something soon. Maybe Easter. July 4th, maybe? I promise you don't want to be in South Dakota in December anyways. I kneeled down to her, eye level. No, ma'am, the thrill of snow quickly turns into resentment and insanity, I promise. People turn to murder or suicide. It's chaos. Dad, Grandma's not a murderer. Cassidy was shaking her head at my obscene silliness. She turned back to her tree, continuing on her artistic quest. I stood, still talking to her. Plus, there are only a couple dozen people in Salt Creek. I'm a little afraid I'd lose my sweet little girl to death by boredom. We exchanged a smile. She knew my exaggeration of Salt Creek's size was a lie. She knew it was fun, too. People snowbound knew how to make fun out of nothing, especially her grandpa. Cassidy was a little taller than her little friend Darcy, who lived next door. She was always computing the latest gain in height compared to her mom. "I'm almost as tall as you, Mama," she'd say after each measurement. I glanced into the kitchen, noticing Nora's posture, how she stood, how they both stood, leaning slightly to the right, with a bit of a slouch. I never paid attention to it until Cassidy began walking. The main difference between the two was that Cassidy's hair was a combination color of my lackluster brownish red and Nora's fiery red, kind of in the middle. Besides the color, their hair was identical, just past shoulder length and the unmistakable look of two who made frequent visits to a stylist. Both had that pale, flawless skin, green eyes with an explosion of auburn bursting from the center out. Oh, and intelligent, smart as a whip. I dreaded the thought of my daughter getting older. I hated to think of her growing into a young lady. Lady. She was the perfect age, it seemed. But maybe, whether I want to admit it or not, it had something to do with the house, the lights, the music, and the smell of good food. I pondered, dreaming that I had the power to pause time when the moment was wonderful. The clock began to chime, a reminder, no doubt, that even the clock will rust and rot as time leaves it behind. After the final and sixth chime, I attempted to redirect the conversation. "What are you hoping Santa brings you, Tater Tot?" "I'll tell you what she wants," Nora said as she burst into the room, smiling as if she had the surprise of a lifetime, which was pretty much my favorite thing about her. She doesn't hold her tongue well, especially if it's supposed to be a secret. "Oh, yeah?" I asked, smiling and moving my gaze over to Cassidy. Her eyes were speaking loudly to her mom. "Mom, please don't." "Okay, I won't tell him that you—" "Mom!" They had a wordless conversation to an apparent completion. Nora turned her attention to me, slowly bringing her eyes away from Cass. "So how was work?" "Fine," I breathed, letting go of the Nora and Cassidy's mystery. "How was you—" "Oh, wait. Yeah, there was a little excitement today. Evidently, Peter has been doing some things he wasn't supposed to be doing, with someone he should never be doing them with." I raised my eyebrows and widened my eyes. "And Sandra must have found out because she showed up at the office. Oh, man, it was nuts. I think they might get a DIVORCE, at least SEPARATED. Man, that smells good," I exclaimed, distracted by the smells lofting in the air. "Chicken pot pie," Nora proudly spouted, answering the question I didn't ask. She was anxious to hear the story. "Maybe you shouldn't be making assumptions like—" lowered her voice. "Divorce, honey." She leaned in, kissing my cheek, and whispered, "We already invited them to the Christmas party. Should we uninvite Peter? No, better not. They'll probably be back together and— Ugh. You know what? Tell me all about it later." "I know what you're saying. Don't think I don't. I'm not a baby," Cassidy chimed. "Mr. Peter's cheating on his Mrs. Sandy. And, Mom, you want Dad to finish the story when I'm not in the room. You do not breathe a thing to your friends, do you hear me?" Nora loved gossip, but at an arm's length. She never wanted to be the direct deliverer of anything that wasn't her business in the first place. She especially didn't want to be accused of spreading information that could result in something as serious as divorce. She just wanted to be in the know. "Seriously, not even to your little circle of truth," referring to Cassidy's closest friend, Darcy, specifically. "I get it, Mom. Geez. Dad, about South Dakota. Is dinner ready? Nora leaned into me and spoke softly. I'm way ahead of you, Finn. Dinner's waiting on you. Be amazed, my love. She leaned in, wrapping her arm into mine. You are married to an amazing woman. A career woman. She, with some occasional help from her sweet love, keeps a relatively organized house. She has dinner on the table. Wow. When I say it out loud, I want to marry her. She leaned her head onto my chest. Maybe later you can give such an amazing woman what she needs after a successfully long day. She pulled on my arm, tiptoed, and kissed me below my ear. I felt an electrical charge move through me. As we walked into the kitchen, she asked quietly, So our little one is bugging you about South Dakota too? 2. The yearly anticipation was upon Cassidy, and trying to remain cool was proving to be in vain. On that Christmas Eve especially, her anxiousness was impossible for her to hide. However, it was also obvious that this was that time in her life of which she was slowly letting go. She had been making that shift from her childlike belief in Santa, the great benefactor of these annual gifts. She began to grab onto a new idea that made more sense to her. We knew this, we'd watched it develop, but it was still a beguiling time for us. I bet I know what Santa Claus is bringing to you this year, Cass, I'd tease at least once a day as we made our way through the 25 days of Christmas. Nora and I were just as excited about this night, not because of the gifts or the potential visit from the North Pole, but because it brought out a lot of the best in each of us. Oh, and I mustn't forget, it was also special for one more reason. It was time for our annual Christmas party. Would someone please get that door? I shouted with a Grinch-like grumble as I was deep in the more important task of mixing the perfect Bloody Mary from the recipe of the master, my dad. The sound of Dad's laughter would be in my mind as I recited his sequence of the Bloody Mary craft. I laughed to myself as I recalled that the lights on the tree, tucked neatly in front of the living room window, rivaled the lights outside, blinking, multicolored, large bulbs. In the freezing cold, in South Dakota, family, friends, fellow postal workers, and a variety of ragtags would come to our yearly Christmas party, many of which were just the unwanted, the lonely. As a boy, it felt that half of that town was elbow to elbow in our little home. The Celtic Christmas fiddles and flutes crackled through Dad's turntable more loudly than it was capable of playing, or at least playing well. But he maxed out the volume nonetheless. Through the evening, people would laugh loudly, eat finger foods, and drink a drunk's worth of Dad's spicy tomato concoction. It's what the night was all about, and I guess to Mom and I. This was perhaps my father's most favorite day each year, and snow wouldn't hinder people from coming most years in those parts. In fact, I remember one Christmas Eve in particular. There were many snowmobiles parked outside as the exclusive method of transportation to this event. I remember Dad teasing, "Look to the lights! Look to the lights!" as people were arriving. It was his way of pretending that his guests had followed his ridiculous display of Christmas lights to make it through the tundra. "Dad, Mr. McGillicuddy is here," Cassidy sang, snapping me from my trance. I glanced up at the clock. Then, with an elevated voice, "Hey, bud, in the kitchen. You're early." "I can't stay, Finn. It's Sandy." "Pull out one of those chairs and sit at the bar. I'll get you a drink," I said, ignoring his urgency. He looked over his shoulder to see that Cassidy was out of earshot. She's left me." I froze for a moment and looked up. He continued with his face pressed deep into his hands. "I'm not sure where she's gone. Maybe her sister's. I think she wants a divorce, Finn. I'm kind of freaking out. I don't know what to do." I popped an olive into my mouth and spoke through my chewing. "You mean like just left? On Christmas Eve?" I pretended to be shocked by my statement, but I could feel my phoniness as much as I could feel the buzz from tonight's first drink. I could sense that he knew I was not too genuine, but he didn't seem to let my plastic sympathy bother him. I poured him 2 fingers of bourbon. Neat. Peter didn't object. He slid it under his sadness and breathed it in. He tipped it up. He took it down like a cup of water. Peter finally looked up at me as I struggled, saying, "All right. Okay. All right then. So, does this mean you're not staying for the Barrett Christmas Eve bash?" My tone was one of, "You should be ashamed. After all, my party is much more important than your stupid marriage." Silence. Peter stared at me with droopy, expressionless eyes and his jaw cocked sideways. Immediately, I knew of my error. My selfishness showed itself frequently, and lately I had grown more keen to the moments that I crossed the line. I'd just not mastered when to shut down before my selfish ways showed themselves. Then, shaking his head, Peter said, "You know what? This was a mistake. I'd defend you all the damn time when Nora and Sandy—" He trailed off, lifting his cup above his mouth as the last little drop fell onto his tongue. "When Nora and Sandy what?" "Just—" Peter stood, turned half away, shaking his head, then displayed his middle finger so close to my face I couldn't even see it. "Fuck you. Fuck you." He ripped his hand back into his body as if to holster a revolver after killing his enemy. "No, Gilly, come on," I pleaded, reaching toward him to grab his shoulder. He backed away. Then my stupid face, decided to smile. "I'm sorry, man," I mumbled as I tried to press my tongue into my cheek. With anger and clenched teeth, he said at a normal volume, "I'm sorry." "Huh. My wife just left me, Finnegan. What kind of friend are you?" "Thanks for the drink, dickweed." The door slammed as he walked out. Just like that, he was gone, leaving behind a house prepared for a party, ready to receive guests. Curiously, I peeked out a sidelight curtain at the front door to be sure he didn't tear up my lawn or run over Danny Boy with his car. Danny Boy was my snowman at the end of the driveway. Nora, wearing that ridiculous elf apron, walked into the foyer as I spied. "What was all the ruckus in here? Was that Peter I heard yelling at you?" "Hey, what do you say about me with Sandy when I'm not around?" I asked, with my face still poked through the curtain. I thought to myself. Good old Gills didn't drive after all. Weird. Peter was walking down the long driveway hill, just about to pass by Danny Boy. Nora, hovering over me, but in the party preparation mode, flipped the foyer light on. "No, turn that off." I bolted to the side, turning off the light to keep my stakeout concealed in darkness. "Damn, lady, are you nuts?" I returned to my post. "What do you mean, say about you? To Sandy? I say you're smart, good-looking. I say you're sexy. I say you're a big pain in the ass. I say you have a little wiener, and that you don't cheat on me like Peter does Sandy." I turned. She stood there, arms crossed, trying to contain her laughter, holding back her cute grin, which only made her more adorable. She turned away, bursting in laughter, tossing her hand into the air. "I'll leave you to stalk your boyfriend," she said as she swooped my lovely drink off the side table as she exited, bringing it straight to her mouth. She took a sip. This is good." "Thank you, honey." "You're welcome," I said sarcastically, just loud enough to reach her. I watched her walk around the corner. I recomposed my reconnaissance. I was surprised to see Peter's shadowy figure flailing his arms up and down, which by itself was somewhat normal, with his hot head and all. But barely in view, I could also see he was placing his frustration in the direction of a second person. This figure stood conveniently hidden from my sight behind the hedges which lined the left side of my driveway. "Who the heck?" I whispered to myself. Squinting my eyes, I could just see the second person's shoes. "Upstairs," I said more loudly than I meant, as the idea harpooned across the bow of my brain. I was running upstairs to see if I could get a view over the hedges, when I remembered that my night vision binoculars would be very handy in such a situation. I told you these were a good investment, Nora. They were at the other end of the hall on top of a bookshelf in my office. I sprinted past Cassidy's room, glanced into her door. Hey, she was busy wrapping a gift to give to one of her little friends at the party tonight. Dad? Hey, I said again, flying past on my return trip with night vision technology in hand. What are you doing? What was Mr. McGillicuddy yelling about? She yelled, her voice trailing off as I dashed to the other end of the house. But by the time I stepped into the window, they were both gone. Crap. Nothing but a lone nighttime walker, bundled up, walking on the other side of the street with his little canine partner zigzagging past ice patches, sniffing for a place to pee. Just as I was about to back away, headlights rounded the corner just down the block, driving toward our home, the Barrett home. They turned in. It was the Lutz family. Ugh, Tommy and his know-it-all kids. I was so hoping you'd not show up tonight. Oh, the RSVP. It's a double-edged sword. 3. I was running on time, which in my schedule meant I was at least 20 minutes early. I just poured my coffee to go on that Monday morning, New Year's Eve. On my way out, I messed up Cass's already messed up morning hair. Bye-bye, sweetie. Love you. Bye, Daddy, she mumbled through her mouthful of cereal, not taking her eyes off her Junie B. Jones book. My boss wasn't too keen on the whole week off thing that most accountants in the world of international shipping got to enjoy. Plus, it was only a half day of work, so I didn't see much point in even going in. I hadn't heard from Peter since that strange night, but Nora did enlighten me that she saw Sandy playing it up like everything was okay at church. Nora thought Sandy was mad at her since she didn't return her calls or text messages. Neither did she return a friendly wave that Sunday morning, which mostly confirmed her suspicion, she thought. She didn't say so, but that hurt Nora. She likened their relationship as a best friend situation, even though she had never verbalized it that way. It was a strange situation, I suppose. Nora had been attending St. Paul's Baptist Church for a few years, the oldest Protestant church on St. Simon's Island. We were both invited by some old coastal college friends that we'd run into while in Brunswick, Darren and Lee Servino. Oh, we'd love you to come, they said. You don't have to wear a tie, Darren said, attempting to sway me with a no-tie policy. We both said we would. Nora did. I didn't. And before I say what I'm about to say, as you have already surmised, I'm guessing, I knew very little about the Bible. Yes, this is even in light of the truth that I'd read the Old Testament from page 1 while in the desert. But I must say, even not knowing much about the Word and religion, that church seemed to be a little confused to me. Not only did the name of their church sound very Catholic, the archenemy of most Baptists, their pastor referred to himself as a saint in each of the 2 services I attended there, which was on Easter each of the previous 2 years. And even more, he wore a cassock and the clerical collar that priests wear. Baptists, I think not, I thought on my first visit there. They referred to him as Pastor Lance, his first name, in the most formal way, but many who were closest to him just called him Smitty. Nora explained to me that his last name was Smith, and that's where his nickname comes from, which I already knew. It seems every other old man in South Dakota is referred to as Smitty. At the beginning of Nora and Cassidy going there, my Nora became a little obsessed, wanting her Irish Catholic parents to approve of the Protestant church she was attending. They never did approve. Nora going there, I suspect, was one of the main reasons they moved to Jacksonville. Now, I won't say much about the Callens, except to tell you that our decision as a family to not go to St. William Church caused a rift in the relationship between Nora and her parents. One of the biggest arguments between Nora and her father was when Nora refused to have Cassidy confirmed. I was willing to have this done. Heck, as the tensions rose, I was even willing to join St. William myself to help repair peace in their relationship. But Nora stood firm, believing the Catholic Church was wrong about many things, especially the means to salvation. Then one day I saw the for sale sign in the Callens' front yard as I drove by. The Callens took the opportunity to move south. I suppose the island had become too small for them. We ignored the topic for the most part in the wake of all the drama. It broke Nora. There was no doubt in that. But as time moved on, so did she. And so did I. Cassidy cried herself to sleep, but found comfort over the telephone, talking to her Grandma Barrett. She memorized her phone number, and calling her became habit. Through the pain of losing one set of grandparents, she became closer than ever to another. So before I had met Smitty that first time, I assumed that maybe he was like the preacher Newton Fry from Oceanside Baptist, as his T-shirt prominently displayed. Newton spent much of his time yelling and waving his Bible in the air, screaming at passerby, mostly tourists. His main point of contention was women in bikinis at the beach, flaunting their bodies. He'd make his point more relevant, even verified by God himself, by reminding people by what authority he spoke, thrusting his Bible to and fro, causing the pages to become crinkly, then making the Bible look, well, used. I saw our local Bible thumper in stop-and-go gas from time to time. He was very nice, even considerate. It caused me to be confused as to how he could separate himself from street-side alter ego, the one who would cast judgment on womenfolk and their tempting bodies. I didn't think much of people like him. I believed him to be the type who would blame Dana for Troy's sin. So eventually I learned that Newton and Lance were clearly and vastly different from one another, although I didn't understand why that would be. I would think, shouldn't all Baptists be, at least, similar? Don't they follow the same God and read from the same book? To be fair, I hardly knew these two men, especially Pastor Lance, even though our town was small. One good reason to not know Smitty well was that he lived in Brunswick and seemed to only come to the island on Sunday mornings, then jetting off in his black E-Class Mercedes when the church crowd disappeared. And for every reason, yet no particular cause, I hated him. That New Year's Eve morning, as I was leaving for work, Nora greeted me at the door in her pajama bottoms, her I Love Canada sweatshirt, and lethally armed with morning breath, mixed with the smell of stale coffee. "I love you," she said at a safe distance away. "I can't wait until tonight. I hope you like the dress I bought." She smiled big, shifting her shoulders and hips back and forth in a dancing rhythm as she clung lovingly to her oversized coffee cup. "I'm sure it's beautiful, baby." I kissed her on the cheek in quick fashion, aware of her breathy offense. "Are you going into work today?" I said, as I always said each workday morning with a smile. Kind of our routine. She worked from home as she had successfully done for over a decade, selling necklaces and a huge variety of costume jewelry. She didn't handle the product anymore, but only facilitated the manufacturing, purchases, and shipping from her home office to her warehouse manager through a web-based interface. She waved off my question as she looked down at her phone. I turned to leave. "Oh, hey, listen to this. Sandy wants to meet for coffee today." She was texting back with one hand, one thumb. "Tell her you're plenty awake and that you've already had enough coffee." "Oh, my sweet love, one can never have enough." I smiled at her comment, shifting one eyebrow up. I turned and walked toward my car as I shifted the keys in my hand, searching for the right one. "Pervert," she said, just loud enough for me to hear, jokingly. "No, honey, I don't have time for sexy time right now. Maybe later," I yelled from my car. Nora's shoulders slouched more than usual as she looked from neighbor to neighbor, inching her way back into the house. "What is wrong with you?" I enjoyed pushing the boundaries of how far I needed to go before embarrassing her. Not an easy thing to do. She reached to close the door. "Love you, dork." "Love you, beautiful."